Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria Medioli, the Executive Director of the Disability Support Program, and thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us here to have a chat about the remedy. Before we get started, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, 1725. The treaties did not include the surrender of lands and resources and instead recognized Mi'kmaq and Maliseet title in Mi'kma'ki. We are all treaty people. We also recognize the historic contributions and legacies of Black Nova Scotians, African and African Nova Scotians, who have been here for well over 400 years. We had an amazing day yesterday with almost 1,200 people involved, with attendees in person, online, speakers, and volunteers. Many of you joined us at different locations, and some of you held watch parties for those that couldn't be there in person. So thank you so much for organizing those. This morning, we had a terrific session with families for them to ask their questions, and this afternoon is for you, the service providers. So there may be others on who are not service providers, but our focus today really is on the questions that service providers have. So we will be prioritizing those questions. I'd like to welcome Eddie Bartnik and Dr. Tim Stainton, our disability leaders who've been with us on this journey. And by now, I think you're probably starting to get to know them quite well. Before I hand it over, I have a few housekeeping items. We're recording this session, so we will be able to share it with everyone later. We're going to take questions for the panel at first, and then we'll take questions to Eddie and Tim later on. This will all be done through the chat function on Zoom. There will be a chat function at the bottom of the screen, and you can submit your questions there. We have people moderating the questions and providing them to Tim, Eddie, and our panelists. We have over 250 people tuning in today, so we won't be able to get to all your questions. We will do our best, though, to answer as many as possible as we go. But as you heard us say yesterday, we will take all the questions and then report back in our post-conference report with answers to those questions. To help our discussion today, we have a panel with representation from our 4 different service provider associations. So we have Tracy Holmes Carbonell, the chair of NSRAA. Hi, Tracy. We have Hank Van Leeuwen, the executive director of DASC, representing Directions. We have Mike Walsh of New Vision Special Care Homes representing CCANS. And we have Joyce D'Entremont, the chair of Diverse Abilities. And unfortunately, the only technical glitch we've had through this incredible weekend is we can't seem to get Joyce on camera, but Joyce is with us with audio. So, and we know Joyce has a strong voice, so I'm sure she will be heard if she can't be seen. Along with the panel, we are very pleased to welcome Hillary Ammett back, who will be a co-facilitator with Eddie and moderator of the panel. So we have a jam-packed afternoon. Thank you again for joining us, everybody. And I'm going to turn it over to Eddie now.
Great. Thanks very much, Maria. So it's Eddie Bartnik here and my colleague Tim next to me. We were the 2 reviewers that developed the remedy. So I really want to welcome all service providers. I think a healthy and vibrant service provider network is a key part of a sustainable remedy, and we welcome and very much value your leadership, contribution and partnership in taking the remedy forward. As Maria sort of mentioned, the format today, we're going to be fairly flexible. We had a very large number of registrations, so we'll need to be a little bit flexible. Tim and I are going to do an overview of the remedy and what it means for service providers to start with. We'll then go to the panel, and then we'll have quite a lot of time for a Q&A session, and we'll come back to the specific questions for that format. Technology being technology, if we have a few hiccups along the way, we'll just go with that. We're going to be very, very flexible, and we're sure that will work. Okay, so just perhaps a little bit of personal introduction for me, and I think Tim will do the same a little bit later. Eddie Bartnik, I live in Perth, Western Australia, one of the 2 reviewers for this project. I worked in the sector both in disability and mental health for the last 40 years, and I've had a range of positions in government, but also a lot of work supporting individuals and families, and actually supporting service providers as well. And so in my career, I've actually had quite a long time implementing many of the ideas that are in the remedy. So very, very excited to be sharing this with everybody. So just a couple of sort of introductory comments, and then for myself, and then Tim and I will run through the remedy, and then we'll sort of move on to the panel. So just some sort of comments from me. So the first thing is I just really wanted to say to Maria and to everybody in Nova Scotia, thank you for having Tim and myself involved with the remedy. We've both been working in the sector for over 40 years, and really we've seen nothing like this. We've done a lot of different things, but this is an incredible opportunity, challenge and opportunity to impact directly on the lives of thousands of people in the next sort of 3 to 5 years. So this is really an historic opportunity. I think it's once in a lifetime. And for those who were there yesterday, we had the Premier issuing an apology, and then it was also backed up by the Minister later on in the day. And these will be on YouTube and released just shortly. So this is not something I've ever seen in another jurisdiction. So this is an incredible time for us. I want to acknowledge the strong, inclusive leadership that got us to develop the remedy. So there's a lot of people working together, and that's how you make progress. And we're going to need a lot of people working together to take the remedy forward. So this thing about collective, inclusive leadership is really, really important. Tim and I, and other independent experts we've brought into this process, we've tried to bring all our wisdom and learning experience about what we know works, but also what we've seen that doesn't work, and that we want to, really make sure is properly implemented in this remedy. So it's a combination of success stories, but also the lessons learnt. But there's nothing in the remedy that Tim and I haven't personally done or seen properly implemented in other jurisdictions. And probably the last comment I want to make is that, and Tim was saying this morning to the families that it's a challenging time, it's uncertain, but it is an incredible time of opportunities. And I do work in a whole range of other countries, and other countries are dealing with big budget cuts, for example. So I'd much rather be here saying, hey, we've got a remedy, we've got extra money, we have a great opportunity, because the alternative would be how we're going to cut services, how we're going to ration even further. And so it's challenging, but it's a really exciting opportunity. So assuming that people have at least had a basic read of the remedy, and some of you may have attended yesterday, but this might be a bit fresh. So we're going to do a little bit of a run through, but also to say that Tim and I did a very thorough lot of presentations yesterday about what all this means, and this will all be on video and be available, so you can get the extended version as well. So probably the first thing is, it is a human rights remedy. So it's not like just a policy or strategy. It's a human rights remedy. It's linked to systemic discrimination in Nova Scotia against persons with disabilities, and that's the court decision in 2021. The finding of systemic discrimination applies to the whole of the province, the government, not just the disability support program. That's important. The Disability Department of Community Services and the Disability Rights Coalition work together to create a human rights remedy, and it's been agreed by all parties, okay, as the way of moving forward. So that's the background to it. And being a human rights remedy, it is a bit different, and we'll sort of explain that a bit further as we go. And so the court findings of discrimination were in 4 areas. First one being unnecessary institutionalisation. The second being right to assistance being denied for people even though they were eligible. Thirdly, that people were having to leave their community of choice to go to where there was a service available. And the 4th area being frequent, indefinite and extended delays on wait lists. And I sort of say this because the remedy, we were required to focus on these 4 areas. So there were other areas of importance, but they sat outside the remedy. So there was some comment in relation to day programs, services for children, those sorts of things in the remedy. But really, so there'll be other work happening, which is outside the remedy, but the remedy was very tightly linked to these 4 areas. So just a quick about how we got here. So Tim and I were appointed in sort of October, November last year, and we did big consultation around that period of time, both in person and a lot of virtual sessions across the province. We read all the documents, all the history, all the submissions. We had many, many workshops, of which I do know that many of you were part of. We did a big run on the data because there was a lot of, I wouldn't say confusion, but we needed to dig pretty deep to understand the total number of people that we were talking about, the number of people in hospitals, the number of people in nursing homes, the number of people in forensic facilities. So we did a lot of work on the data, the population which is covered by the remedy. And then Maria did a fabulous job of getting together the round table of a whole bunch of provincial government agencies who also need to buy into and support the remedy. So that was extremely important. Then in January, Tim and I were back and we had another big series of meetings. We prepared the report, and quite incredibly that both the government and the Disability Rights Coalition agreed to the remedy. They put it to the Board of Inquiry. They got provincial government support, and mid-year we've actually got the remedy in total signed off and approved, which is an incredible opportunity. So I want to thank everyone for their inputs into this, because the remedy has been built from all those inputs. So I'll now move over to Tim, and Tim's going to just talk us through the 6 key directions.
Thanks, Eddie, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd say it's nice to see you, but I can't see you, so it's nice to know you're there. Yeah, I'm Tim Stainton, so I'm from British Columbia at the Canadian Institute for Inclusion and Citizenship at UBC. I'm also a parent of a son with an intellectual disability, and like Eddie, I've been kicking around this kind of work for about 40 years, both in the NGO sector and the last 30 years or so in the academic sector. So it was a real privilege and honor to get this opportunity to work on this. I said to the family this morning, as Eddie mentioned, that, you know, it can be a nervous time, it can be a time of uncertainty, but excuse me. But I think for service providers, you know, the world will change, and it will change for you. But we believe that the remedy will allow you to do what you are there to do and want to do, which is support people to live the best life they can do. That will probably mean you need to change some of the things you do, but absolutely, despite a move to more individualized kind of approaches, the need for good quality, committed support people and service providers is only going to increase. So I hope, as Eddie said, you see this as a very exciting opportunity going forward. So very quickly, I'm just going to run through our 5 key directions and our 6th kind of allied point. And you will have heard some of this, many of you, if you tuned in yesterday, you would have heard it. But the key feature to the new system is going to be a revised system of planning and support coordination. So they will replace the current case manager kind of system. So in many cases, they will be the people that you will interact with, negotiate with, and be talking to about what the folks they're supporting need in the way of help from you. The big change is it's going to be much more intensive. So right now, the care coordinators have very high caseloads. They do their best to keep up with folks. But one of the things we said, to make this work, you really need to improve your ratios. So for the folks coming out of institutions and folks with more complex needs, they will work with a IPSC with a ratio of about 1 to 15, 1 to 20. So pretty low ratio, which should allow them to do the work they need to do. And then for the bulk of folks, they're going to deal with the new role of local area coordination. Again, they will have a much lower ratio than current case managers, and they will support folks in the community, folks coming into the system, or folks who just want to make a change. You're probably all aware the plan is to close all of the institutions, and that really runs from the larger institutions, the RCFs and the ARCs and the RFCs. Almost got it all right. Right down to the large group homes. The small option homes that are currently out there will continue, but there will be no new small option homes built. It'll also include the folks coming out of nursing homes. Some of you may be familiar with the shared services program that is now no longer a pilot and will be expanding to help those folks move into community. Probably where it will most affect you is number 3 here, which is the new community service strategies. The home share approach is really building up on the current AFS program, but will be ramped up with a bigger kind of architecture support system around it, and that's certainly an area where they're going to need community service providers to step up to fulfill that role. The ILS will continue, but the shackles will be taken off. It'll be no longer limited to 31 hours. And that's really to bridge the gap between the funding that goes into a small option home currently and what you can do in the community. So that's going to open up and have a much broader spectrum. The TSA programs will shift to an innovation program, and there will be a post-school planning program. So in all of those areas, that's going to be places where service providers are going to have to step up and step into those roles. The current allied health supports, so behavioral, mental health, those kind of supports, are generally tied to the institutions. So the plan is to move those into regional teams allied to our regional hubs in the community. So the folks who need those kind of supports will be able to access them closer to home and in the community that they live in. The 5th direction is the one you've probably heard a lot about, is the move to individualized funding. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute, so I won't talk a lot about that at the moment. And lastly, there's a series of what we call enablers and capacity building systems. Sorry, I should move this on. And that has a number of different components from the monitoring and evaluation of the remedy, building up leadership, capacity building, transitional supports for service providers, the development of new housing options, workforce planning, all of those kind of things around the edges that we need to move the overall system forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Eddie and the panel.
Cool. Hey, so just sort of picking up on those strategies, and maybe so just return to like one of the key tensions we had with the remedy was because there was a finding of human rights discrimination, pretty much the advocates and the lawyers were saying, well, all this needs to be done on day one, and every day you take is one day too long. So we've sort of got this urgency to remove the discrimination. And yet we had other people telling us, well, we need time to do things, to plan, to get staff and all that. And so pretty much the remedy is this balance between the urgency but the time required to bring in all the infrastructure. So at the end of the remedy, if you haven't had a careful look, we've got a year by year targets, indicators and outcomes, which map out all the things that need to be done in the order in which they need to be done to build the remedy. And that'll be monitored by an annual reporting to the court and an independent evaluation process. So, so this will have a lot of teeth. This will be something that will be monitored very, very carefully. And then we'll have various mechanisms. We've got the provincial advisory mechanism, the regional hubs, which we'll be setting up. We'll have regional advisory groups. So there'll be processes to take this forward. So we're just going to now move on to some of the key changes in a bit of a nutshell. So this is a human rights and a person-centered approach. So it's a rebalancing of the power in the system. So we'll have a healthy, vibrant provider system, but we will also have individuals and families which will be resourced and will have their funding that will be brought up as equal partners into that process. Okay, so it is a rebalancing of power and increasing the ability of people to choose with their individual funding. There's significant new funding in the system to address the wait lists, and Maria did a pretty fabulous job of the whole population, the best estimates of the resource requirements for the remedy. So they've been in general approved. So we've got significant new funding. And Tim mentioned the strengthened individual planning and coordination strategies. That's really going to be a major driver, because the narrative there is very much about a home and a good life in my local community. So it's going to be this big move from, the centre of the universe and the institutions and the hospitals back to local communities and to regional hubs. Stronger focus on choice and control through individualised funding and portability, so people will be able to move their funding across the province. There will be increasing the range of community-based living alternatives, both for people coming out of the institutions, but also people that are currently living at home. And very important to me, there will be these allied health clinical supports, because I'm aware that service providers can do the very best they can do, and support networks can do the best they can do, but sometimes we need really high quality allied health and clinical support. So we're going to build that. We've got more of a whole of government approach, where we're going to be bringing in all the other government departments, and particularly health and mental health and addictions as being key partners. And then, of course, we've got the workforce and the cultural changes that are needed. And for those that were on the conference yesterday, Lorna Sullivan from New Zealand, who's very, very experienced in this type of transformation and reform, did a fabulous presentation about the 4 key sort of cultural reforms and changes that are going to be required. And so that will be a video and a slide pack when you get that. I think that will be very, very helpful. Okay, back to you. Still me. No, next one. Going too soon. So support for service providers. So we've got so service providers have been involved in the remedy consultations. We've had a whole bunch of implementation workshops that people have been invited to, and of course they're involved in the advisory committee now, and also will be involved in the new ones that are coming up. So the regional hubs will have those new regional advisory processes, but importantly, they're going to have a say in advising on local priorities and local development projects, and each region will have an innovation fund to help build, to fund local proposals and help build capacity of individuals, families and communities, and strategic partnerships locally. So that'll be something really new. There'll be a workforce development plan and a leadership and training plan. And also importantly, we're going to develop a service development transition fund, and that's in the remedy for June 2024, to support DSP service providers to manage the required changes in culture, capability and infrastructure. And I also just want to mention this morning with the families, we had a very strong families learning from other families, families sharing information from families in other jurisdictions. I imagine it'll be exactly the same with the service providers, that there's a network of people in Nova Scotia, but there's a network of service providers in other jurisdictions that have been exactly down this road. They have experience and they've got learnings about what works and what doesn't. And we would see that to be a key part of sort of what's going forward. So what this means for service providers, significant change, but also very significant opportunity. All of these changes have been successfully implemented in other jurisdictions, and so there is technical and peer support available. Can I just say, I particularly in my home state of Western Australia, I've seen 20 or 30 years of this sort of move to individualised funding, first of all in my state and in my country, across the whole country, in Australia where this is now the system. Those providers that embrace the cultural and capability changes, they develop positive and trusting relationships alongside the people they support, and who are open to a broader range of more individualised support models, they do extremely well, okay? So the opportunity is there for people to do extremely well, but the leadership of service provider organisations need to embrace the cultural and structural changes and commit to a transition development program, which involves workforce and cultural change, infrastructure to support individualised funding, and also investment in new service models to support individual choice and control. And again, it was interesting yesterday. So there'll be a transition fund to support this, but Lorna Sullivan yesterday was talking about, this can start very quickly and quite easily, where providers start working in partnership with the people that they're supporting to even include people in even sort of like step by step in being involved in the recruitment of new staff, for example, or providing advice about how certain things operate within the service. So there's the big agenda, but there's an agenda which is really about the changed relationship where people with disabilities and their families are more partners, and we sort of figure these things out together. In terms of individual staff, can I just say, if individual staff are proactive and they take up the challenge and see this as a great opportunity and get extra training, the world's their oyster, really, in terms that there are new roles, there are new opportunities. And so we really invite people to take some initiative and to sort of move forward and to embrace those new opportunities. So I'm just going to go back to Tim. Oops, sorry, Tim, we've lost a slide. So there was another slide. So I'll get Tim to talk to it anyway, which is really a little bit more about the transition to individualised funding.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. And I imagine for a lot of the service providers, they're kind of wondering, well, how will we get paid in an individualized funding kind of system? Now, really, an individualized funding system has kind of multiple ways it will play out. The key change will be that rather than funding services, every individual will have their own budget, whether they manage it themselves or not. So where we have a collective service, so a small option home, for example, it will be the composite of all of those individual budgets. And the reason we're shifting there is then that gives the individual the power to move on to something else should they choose. So it doesn't mean that everything will be a one-to-one contract with every individual, although that will be an increasingly common scenario. And in some cases, people will choose simply to have their budget, but it managed by other sources. There will be a backbone developed that will help the management and the employment side of things, the transfer of funds. So in many cases, you would be receiving your funds via this backbone service. There will be transitional funding, as Eddie mentioned, available to help develop the new infrastructure and help people make that transition. But in many cases, the funding may still, and certainly in the transition period, may still flow from DSC, but it will flow based not on funding your service, but as you are the provider that individual has chosen, and will direct the funding in that kind of way. And as I mentioned, that would be supported in some cases by this backbone agency that will help manage that. It will be a change. It will probably be a bit more complicated at first, but as I say, we've put in the transitional supports and the training supports that will help make that. The key reason we're doing this is because it increases that choice and control for the person, but it also opens up a lot more flexibility for you to do things differently with each individual, to develop new supports, right? If the person comes with a budget, you don't have to get a budget for a large service. You can work with them to figure out, all right, what do you need from us to help make your plan work? So we think it will, we know it will free up you to innovate and be creative alongside with the individuals. There hopefully won't be many, but if there are some service providers say, well, that's not the way they do things, then they will probably fade away in this system because people may not want to come to you for that service. In all honesty, there's such an acute need for supports and services that I don't see that happening, and it certainly will not happen if you don't want it to happen, I think is the message. Okay, I'm going to send it back to Eddie.
Fantastic. So Tim and I are going to connect again later on around questions about the remedy itself, but a key focus of the day really was to hear about the reality on the ground, the service provider view. So I'm very, very pleased to be welcoming Hilary Ammett, who will be with myself facilitating our service provider panel. Hillary was part of one of our panels yesterday and did a superb job. So we're very much looking forward, Hillary, for you to perhaps introduce yourself and then to kick off our process with the panel.
Thank you, Eddie. Well, thanks for those kind words about yesterday. It was flying by the seat of my pants, and I'm doing the same thing again today. So
Is your mic on there?
it should be. Yeah, yeah. That being said, by way of self-introduction, my name is Hillary Amit, and I was until June of this year the Executive Director of Highland Community Residential Services in New Glasgow, having served in that role for just shy of 25 years. In my career there as the Executive Director, I had the opportunity to serve as the President of the Nova Scotia Residential Agencies Association and got to meet a number of allied colleagues from the adult residential services, adult residential centers, the regional residential centers, the RCFs, as well as the day service provider network as well. And what I'll say about, by way of introduction, I think that's sufficient from me. This is mainly about what the current group of service providers is experiencing on the ground and how they're reacting to this human rights remedy report and its implementation. So there are three questions or 3 or 4 questions, set questions that we've asked all of our panelists to prepare for. And we have a speaking order, and I'm going to ask the first question of each of the 4 panelists in turn. And the speaking order will be Tracy with Tracy, Hank, Mike, and Joyce would be the 4th person to speak. So what I'd like for each of you to do, I can't see any of you at the moment on the screen. What I'd like each of you to do in turn is to introduce yourselves briefly and then to talk about what's the most important thing that you want to say about this remedy. And Tracy, if you could lead off with that, that would be great.
Thanks, Hillary. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. So I'm Tracy Holmes Carbonell. I'm the current chair of Nova Scotia Residential Agencies Association. And we're a coalition of agencies that provide residential care, serving persons with disabilities. And our mission is to strengthen those agencies, member agencies, pursuing excellence in community-based service. My other hat is I am the executive director of the Yarmouth Association for Community Residential Options. And today we provide residential services, small option homes and ILS in both Yarmouth and the metro region. And we also coordinate the Western Regional Respite Program. And we have 3 social enterprise businesses, 2 in Yarmouth and 1 in Halifax. So just a little bit about me, myself. About 27, 28 years ago, I kind of fell into this sector like a lot of other people that I know. And I knew instantly that this is where I needed to be. And I've been here ever since. So just something that I would like to say about the remedy is, even though I think this was mentioned a bit earlier too, but even though it is a time of extreme anxiety, fear, a lot of unanswered questions, we still need to keep forefront that this is an amazing time for Nova Scotians, period. We really have to fight against that negativity and fear and not let it cloud our positive journey. I'm really excited, but I, to be honest, have felt a little overwhelmed by that skepticism and a little bit of negativity. But to be honest, yesterday, hearing the premier make that apology, all the panelists, the speakers, and most importantly, John, Lita, Vicky, Huey, and Tracy tell their stories and get really emotional about the people that actually aren't here with us today to see such a momentous time. That was powerful. Like, I walked away extremely drained and energized at the same time. But to be honest, I'm still reeling from it. I felt that yesterday is exactly what I needed. And I think I don't think I'm alone. It was an amazing experience to kick off and get us back into Remedy is exactly why we need to be doing what we're doing.
Thank you, Tracy. And yes, yesterday was an amazing, amazing day, and it did provide a lot of us with hope. And you absolutely caught it right on. Thank you. Hank, you would care to introduce yourself, sir, and talk a little bit about what you find, what you would like to say about, most importantly, about this remedy?
Sure. Thank you, Hillary. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So my name is Hank von Leeuwen. I am the executive director of DASC, or the Dartmouth Adult Services Center, based in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Listening to you, Hillary, mention, and Tracy also, your 20+ years of experience in this kind of work. So full disclosure, full candor, then that makes me feel like I have just a tiny fraction of expertise. So I've been the executive director of DASC for about 2.5 years now. And but several years ago, I also was CEO of Easter Seals Nova Scotia, which is also an agency that provides supports for persons with disabilities. And New Leaf Enterprises is a Directions Council member that is a program of Easter Seals. So I guess I've got somewhere in total of 7 or 8 years of experience supporting people in this particular line of work with inclusion. I think the theme that leaps forward in my mind right away when I think about the remedy, and this word has been referenced a couple of times already in the preamble this afternoon, and that is switching ourselves and when I say ourselves, I'm talking about day programs or vocational programs, as sometimes they're referred to, within our Directions Council family and network, switching the culture and making the change to one where people who use our programs and services have more control and more choice. So, and choice is a word I see sprinkled throughout the language and the conversation pertaining to the remedy. I think it's great. I think it's really important. But when I think about the remedy, I agree with Tracy. This is an exciting time. This is an exceptional time to redesign and redraw how we provide services, how we design them, how we host them. But it is huge, and it can definitely feel overwhelming. And so the remedy, to me, it's like someone has taken this giant snow globe, and the snow globe contains all these bits of tissue that pertain to programs and services, and given this snow globe a very vigorous shake, and the snowflakes are falling, and now they're settling. And it's our job now as service providers to figure out, where can we gently sweep these flakes into a pile, and a pile or a pillar that becomes a foundational support for something we haven't thought of before. Snow, just to continue with the snow analogy or metaphor, snow is also nourishing. We need snow. It's good for our water supply. It's replenishing. It's fertilizing. So it is exciting. So I can only speak about DASC, and for decades, that DASC has existed in some variation or format for decades, almost 60 years in the Dartmouth area. We've been called different names. We've had different centers or facilities, but we've pretty much kind of done the same thing. And we have rightfully, and my predecessor in this role deserves a lot of credit for this, cultivated and built a reputation for being, a robust social enterprise where we provide work and training opportunities for persons with intellectual disabilities. However, the challenge now is, and we're starting to go down this path at DASC, and I can speak more about this perhaps later in the Q&A format, but that service probably has been somewhat prescriptive. It's probably been somewhat static. It's probably been somewhat formulaic. So, and what I mean by that is, so a person with an intellectual disability, a DASK participant would come to DASK, and DASK would say to them, here's what you're doing today. Kind of, that's what we've been doing. And so now with the remedy, I think the remedy provides us with a perfect opportunity to flip that upside down, so that when an individual, a participant comes to DASK every day and they say, based on a variety of choices that we provide, a diversity of choice, I'd like to do this. And culturally, I think that's where we need to make the shift. And we are in the process of making that shift right now. So as many of the people who are probably on the Zoom right now will know, certainly my colleagues at Directions Council, many of us are in the curve trying to make the shift away from where a participant comes to DASK, our agency, and they perform work. And historically, maybe they've been earning a stipend or an honorarium or a training incentive. Pick your noun. We're stopping that at DASK so that when they work, it's a minimum wage. And that is a huge cultural shift. So in a way, in real time, while the remedy is being introduced to all of us, we're trying to unpack this really huge cultural shift within our own organization. But the timing of both is good and synchronized. And I personally like that. So that's my answer to this first question.
Thank you, Hank, and it's great to hear that, and with Tracy as well, to hear that the legacy programs that all of our service providers currently represent, like yours, Hank, is willing to step in there and start innovating as quickly as possible, because that's kind of what's happening. That's what's in front of us right now. That being said, Mike, if you would care to introduce yourself, please, and tell us what you would like to say that you hold to be most important about this remedy report.
Hi, my name is Michael Walsh, and I'm the president of New Vision Special Care Homes. I'm here today representing the Continuing Care Association of Nova Scotia, and the Continuing Care Association of Nova Scotia is a coalition of service providers from across Nova Scotia. And in the past, I was the past president and vice president. I've served numerous roles, but today I'm here just as a member that was asked to come and speak. For me, I see the remedy as a great opportunity to do things better in the future. I think a lot of us have been unsatisfied with the existing system, and we know we can do better. And I think that this presents an amazing opportunity right now where we can move away from large institutionalized facilities and begin innovating and find better solutions to serve people better in communities. We're kind of excited to find out more about how some of the individualized funding will work and the new more intensive program planning. But at the end of the day, we have to look at this as a very positive change for many Nova Scotians. And we have to look at how we can create new innovative models to move forward and better serve people.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's absolutely great to hear from you and from CCANS that you're embracing the opportunity that this represents for all of us. And Joyce, I'm sorry that we can't see you, but again, if you would care to introduce yourself and Diversity Association of Nova Scotia as well, and then if you would care to speak about what you believe to be the most important aspects of this remedy report, that would be great.
Thank you, Hillary. And my apologies that you guys can't see me, but I know most of my colleagues know what I look like, so that's not a problem. I'm having technical difficulties today. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel today. I represent DANS, Diverse Abilities Nova Scotia. So we used to be 7 ARCs or RCs, but we closed Harborside down, so we're remaining 6. Very passionate colleagues that are on this call today or this meeting with us. So I'm the chair of DANS. My other hat is that I am the CEO of Mountains and Meadows Care Group. I have a 34-bed ARC, 23 individuals under the ILS program, 9 individuals in an apartment setting, 2-day programs, and 7 small option homes. And of course, I was the CEO of Harborside Lodge that recently has closed down and had wonderful experience seeing participants transition from institutional living to community-based living, and just seeing the wonderful opportunities and how these individuals are thriving. Some of my colleagues on this call, Michael and Tracy, also have some of those participants under their programs, and it's just been a remarkable experience for us. I'm really excited that change is coming for the participants. And as a DANS group, we have had numerous discussions of how we are so supportive of the principles upon which the remedy is based. So thank you to the authors of the remedy who took so much time to meet and to listen to many individuals across the province. We do feel that you got this right. Of course, we always have questions around the how, but we do support the remedy 100%. As service providers of what they call big institutions, we have always tried for participants to live their best life integrated in communities. But because we were always faced with strict policies or funding shortcomings, it was extremely difficult to really think outside the box. So we're really excited that things are going to change. And some of the proposals we've sent that we could never move forward may now be able to actually come to fruition. So we're really excited about that. I listened to the families this morning, and I must say I was moved and touched by some of the parents that spoke about their journeys. We have to do better. As a province, we have to do better. And for me, yesterday was a wonderful day. I got a lot out of it, but this morning, listening to some of those moms on the call really touched my heart. So as a DANS group, we are excited. We're embracing the remedy. We want persons with disabilities in Nova Scotia to live their best lives reintegrated in communities. So we're all on the same page, and sometimes I think institutions are painted with maybe a difficult brush, I'll say, which is not always warranted. Programs that were put in place were inherited, and we're all about closing them down and looking for different support models for persons with disabilities. So thanks again.
Thank you, Joyce. Really appreciate the challenge that you're facing in terms of being identified, as you said, as the big institutions, and then at the same time trying to innovate and move forward. It is a lot of hard work. That being said, folks, every time I listen to Eddie and Tim speak, I learned something new about the remedy, and one of the things I was reflecting on as they spoke earlier was the last time we had individualized funding for people, for anybody in the disability support system was before the year 2000. And I think there was in 1993, may have been the last time there was a uniform individualized funding set of per diems established for that model of service. And today I was listening to Tim talk about how new small option kinds of, or congregate care kinds of things might emerge in the future based on individualized funding for those people who need that kind of, or who choose that kind of support. And for all of us in the existing system, this will be a huge, huge challenge. So that would be sort of, if I was answering the second question for myself, that would be what I would be looking for, is how we figure out this individual funding piece. So I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, and I apologize if I have already. But for each one of you, the second question lined up was Tracy, and if you would be so kind again as to lead off, what part of the remedy do you most want to hear about now, or most want to find out more about at this point?
Thanks, Hillary. I'm pretty sure you didn't steal anyone's thunder, because I think it's probably on everyone's list anyway, with the individualized funding. So for sure, our members are wanting to know more about sort of how that individualized funding will, affect the current status of agencies, and how the transition will happen from the per diem-based funding to individualized funding, what that will look like. We're also very interested in how the standards will be developed, or what type of standards there will be for home share or other options that we don't currently have, and how will that be managed. Something that was asked yesterday too was also on my list, and it was just around that whole unionized environments, how we'll navigate through the system of being unionized and individuals choosing their staff. Let's see, I think we all know as service providers that we need to change in some way. So what options we would have, to deliver that change, and questions around how we can secure the resources that we need in community, particularly the housing situation and staffing. So those were things that we want to know about.
Well, that's a pretty big list right there. I'm glad I'm not in Maria's job. That's all I can say for that. Because all those questions will eventually flow across her desk, and she'll have to find people who can supply those answers along with us and work with us. Hank, how about you? What do you want to find out now most about in terms of the remedy report?
Everything that Tracy said. No, I'm partially kidding, because she really nailed it. But I think for me, it's mostly understanding and anticipating and determining how that transition from our current model, where we're mostly, in DASC's case, we receive core funding from the Department of Community Services. So as Maria has, I've heard Maria say in other occasions, so the funding is tied to the center, or the funding is tied to the agency as opposed to the individual. So, and I understand the shift. I understand philosophically the move to individualized funding. So understanding how that's actually going to practically work, and I'll paint a bit of a picture here so you can understand why agencies like ours are hungry for this kind of information and trying to figure out how we can plan for it. So today, at any given moment in time, there is a wait list in the Dartmouth area community of about 40 people, give or take, in a given week, for someone to be able to attend or participate in a program at DASC, right? So we have We have community employment programs. We have training programs. We have life and social skills programs, rec and leisure, lifestyles programs. We have a youth program. We have an individual support program. And every day we think about there's at least 40 families, caregivers in the Dartmouth area community that have been waiting, and in some cases for a very long time. I'm talking several years plus, to have a crack at accessing a DASK program. So we feel an obligation as an agency to meet the needs and to try to find a program spot for those people. And wait lists, of course, are referenced in the remedy. So I paid close attention to that. So how does it work in the new model where there are going to be people who are moved out of institutions into community? The emphasis is on program of choice, community of choice of where to live, how to live. And these things are all important and all legitimate. So we have to somehow at DASK marry the needs and interests of people who've been waiting patiently for a decade or maybe even longer to have a spot at a DASK program with someone who's now moving into the community quickly because perhaps they've been moved out of an institution and into community living. So how do we bridge those two competing and yet both very legitimate need for access to a day program or some kind of activity or program in their community? And then tied to that is with individualized funding, someone may come to DASK and say, oh yeah, I'd like to be in that program for 2 hours a week. Could be an arts and crafts program, could be a pre-employment program, who knows? We can't suddenly, liberate a staff or move a staff away from their current obligations to meet the needs of people that they're supporting, to meet the needs of someone new trying to access one of our programs. So it's a question of resources, staffing. As anyone who is a service provider can tell you, it's very difficult to hire someone to come in and do a program for someone 2 hours a week, right? You need a core complement of staff who are flexible, who are trained, who are versatile, and can accommodate any number of needs in a given week, because our programs are going to be more dynamic. They're going to be more fluid. So I guess an understanding of that transition from, and I was heartened to hear, by the way, when you referenced the establishment of a service development transition fund. So that's a tangible that I can grasp and go, okay, well, I'll wait to hear what that's about, and I guess DASK can access some money there to help us. So that's a very long way of explaining my answer to question number 2.
Thank you, Hank. And yes, it is challenging moving from our current way of doing business and offering services to the new way where it's almost moving into a fee-for-service model for the day service providers, and how you reposition is it is very challenging for sure. But other jurisdictions have done it and have done it very successfully. And so we don't have to invent the wheel here. It's there. It's elsewhere that we can draw from. How about you, Mike? Care to weigh in on what you would want to hear most importantly or most about now in relation to the Human Rights Remedy Report?
Absolutely. I think there's been some great points brought up already. I think one thing our membership is wondering about is the role that service providers will play moving forward with the remedy and collaboration. With some of the changes that we've seen already in the report with closures of ARCs, RRCs, and also without the development of new small option homes, if there's not going to be any more customized infrastructure or specialized infrastructure being developed moving forward, we're wondering how some of the persons with higher need supports will be able to transition to the community. It would be great to be part of those planning models as well. That's a big part of it, but the big thing we're wondering about is how we can be part of the collaborative process as a whole, because I know every one of the agencies here representing their membership today, we all have a lot of common interest as well regarding the persons that we serve. And we also have the common goal of improving services across Nova Scotia and access to those services. It just seems like a daunting task when we read some of the report, and we're trying to plan ahead, forecast, see how we're going to help transition these persons to community. If there's not going to be development of new specialized infrastructure, especially given the housing crisis and the shortage of available housing across the province. So it would be great if we could be part of those discussions, because we do have a lot of experience of creating new models of care in community, and may be able to help identify risks and also opportunities for growth.
Michael, thank you for identifying the hidden resource of this province, which is the existing network of service providers, and the strengths and the experiences that they bring, that they have right now at the table. And it's an enormously daunting task for the Maria Meggiolis of this world to be able to herd all of us into a room and get us to sing from the collective book. But again, as I said, many of us are glad we're not Maria Meggioli. She has the big job of getting that to happen. But I'm sure she also has the skill set to ensure that the collaboration that you so kindly offered will be welcomed and be part of this process of transformation we're all undergoing in this province. And that being said, Joyce, I have to confess I'm having enormous difficulty not seeing you and being able to react to you. But I guess we'll just have to accept that and move on. But if you would care to weigh in as well on what part of the remedy report you would like that most interests you right now, that you'd like to hear about in the present tense.
Thank you, Hillary. Yeah, I just want to say, Hillary, it's really difficult for me as well that people can't see me. I've never had this experience before, so it is hard. So thank you. So just all my colleagues on the call have done a really good job articulating what they want to find out more about. I'm going to focus less on the funding and the money, because I know DCS has to fund these programs. So I'm just going to assume that we're going to learn more as we go. Yesterday, the announcement was made in this province of the biggest change ever that DSP is going to see. We have a lot of people that are sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for this change. Now that the announcement has come out, we need a plan and deliverables and timelines, because I do not want to have families calling me, asking me when certain things are going to happen or why they haven't happened. So what I want to see the most is the plan, the who, the how, the what. I know we've been talking very high level of the philosophies, the principles and all that, which we all agree with. We know that this province is in the worst crisis for homelessness right now, housing shortages. We have ILS participants waiting on a wait list right now that we cannot find apartments for, that we're working with them, their families are working with them. There's no apartments to be found. Unlike Michael, Dan is really worried that there may not be more infrastructures built, like small options, but we do know the why of that. We are in a healthcare crisis. I am a political junkie, and I watched the sitting of the legislature for the last 2 weeks. Housing, healthcare are all at the forefront of every single discussion that's being held in that house. Mental health crisis, we know that there are, just look on Indeed to see how many jobs are posted. So we're in a big crisis. We do not want more homelessness in this province. So and we do not want persons with disabilities placed at more risk than they are today. So what we would like to see as a dance group is a well-defined plan of the how and the timelines. And I know we're all there to help Maria and her team to come up with solutions and ideas. We've offered this before, and we're offering it again. And I did hear Mike with CCANS, which I'm part of, also offering the same thing. So that's what I'd like to hear more about the plan.
Thank you very much, Joyce. And I really truly do appreciate your patience and willingness to participate, even without the visual component of this conference this afternoon. Eddie, shall I turn it back to you at this point, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. It's hard to resist the option of trying to respond to the questions. Just so you know that Maria is monitoring what's coming through the Q&A. So we're sort of, there's all these stickies on the desk at the moment. And we've been making notes about the questions that people on the panel have also been raising. So I think we'll just continue with the panel, and then we'll take stock at that point about whether we start to go into some of these responses now, or whether we have a break and then come back and do that in some logical order. So the next round of questioning, again, back to our panel members, is around the question of what types of training or support for service providers would be most helpful. And just to let you know that part of what we're trying to build up through the conference is a more refined communication information strategy. And also we're building up the workforce training and development plan. So we're trying to get a strong sense of the most burning questions, the information needs, but also the sorts of training and development and support investments that are going to be most helpful to the different groups involved. So Tracy, if I can come back to you with that question about your thoughts about the types of training or support for service providers in this process.
For sure, thanks. At NSREA, we do talk a lot about this topic, actually. So our executive director, Laura Church, mentioned that trauma-informed training is really important. And also, we talked a little bit about change management, just helping any training that can help organizations do this transition as well.
Yep.
I think that's key. As Mike mentioned earlier as well, any opportunities for collaboration or information sharing, gathering, I think that is something that we would value as well. And training maybe for board members as well, or having training that we can receive as service providers to then pass along to our boards, just explaining the change and how, you know, liability and issues that they are concerned about every day. And in the support, actually, I'll take it a little bit back to what Lorna had said yesterday. And she talked a lot about ensuring that we just don't close institutions, but create a bunch of really small mini institutions in community. So I think that there should be some type of training, because not only the people supported are moving from institution, but a lot of the staff, and we might need some type of training around mindset shift, and in particular around dignity of risk and opportunity for choice. And it's a big world out there for opportunity, but there's a lot of risk involved with that, which scares a lot of people. And John, you know, spoke about that yesterday. Even though at NSREA we have been supporting people in community for a long time, this is something that we discuss quite often, and we actually even developed our own training program titled RIC, Respect, Integrity, Caring and Knowledge, which is centered around those core values and principles, and making sure people are treated with dignity and ensure that they're supported in a respectful way. So that is something that I think would be a huge value. As Hillary said yesterday, it's everything. It's our language. It's the way the words that we use, how our homes look and feel, and how our support staff are supporting them. So those would be things for training. I think too, as Joyce had mentioned, the housing situation, just really some support in maybe managing or support in securing some type of housing situations with landlords and builders as well, because that's just a big challenge all around for all Nova Scotians. So I think that's it.
Fantastic. Hey, this is like gold, Tracy. Can I just say that's a fabulous list of ideas. And if I just make one comment about language, because we all sort of picked this up yesterday about words people were using and how the language will need to change to reflect more of a human rights approach. And I just want to reflect on one conversation I had with a young man yesterday. And I was introducing myself, and he introduced himself as a client of one of the services. And I thought, it wasn't, I'm John, I'm from here, I love to do this, I'm here because I'm interested. It was, so there's a lot here for us all to shift from this language of people's disabilities and the services they receive as sort of defining people to much more who people are and what they love to do and what they bring, as a contribution. And so that's a really good call, because I'm sort of very sensitive to that, because I think one of the things Lorna said yesterday is we all need to start modelling this new human rights. So this is about leadership. It's about the words we use, the frame of reference, all those sorts of things. So that was particularly a really nice call. Thank you, Tracy. Hank, if we can come back to you.
Yep, sure. Thank you very much. So a few things come to mind for me for this particular question. And I don't know if training is the right word, but more like education. So, and I think even education for persons with disabilities around what choice is and why they have choice. And if you have a choice in a kind of activity or a program that you want to participate in, what commitment is involved with that choice and what outcome is involved with that choice. So we had, as many of the folks on this Zoom know, a few weeks ago, we had a First Voices conference in New Glasgow. So where persons with disabilities got together. It was the first kind of meeting of this kind and this size and scope, probably since pre-COVID. There was more than 100 people there. And they learned about what advocacy is, and they talked about self-advocacy, and there were some learnings there. And for choice, I'll just give you kind of an example that resonated with me at DASC last week, where one of the program supervisors was having a conversation with me about choice. We're trying to obviously enable people who are in our programs to have more choice. So, but as an example, if they choose not to work, say at DASC, on a particular thing that's happening on a production floor, then the outcome of that is they're not going to be paid. So we're working very hard to talk about that with participants and educate them about that. Or another kind of manifestation of this is we had a participant who the day before the work in their area was going to commence on the production floor had committed to working, right? Because we have to know how many people are going to be in a group, what kind of supports do they need, how are we going to staff it, etc. Because we now have programs at DASC that are non-employment based in a day-to-day kind of sense. So if they choose on a Wednesday afternoon, yep, I'm going to be working the next day, they're making a commitment to that job, but then Thursday morning they change their mind, and so we've encountered a bit of that, and it's just a huge learning for everybody around what choice is, what comes with choice, what are the outcomes of a decision. If they hadn't had an opportunity to really have that chance to do so before. And again, I'm not sure if it's training, but I don't think you can have too many sessions like this where you engage families and caregivers about what choice is. So we run into this time to time at DASC where a participant really wants to do something or really doesn't want to do something, but their mother or their father or somebody in their home said, no, but you should be doing this. That's why you're going to DASC. Who has the choice here? So it's kind of like an education for families and caregivers to help empower them to empower their loved one to have choice, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. Thank you very much. And that's sort of teasing out like, you know, the wishes and desires of the individual versus the wishes and desires of the family in a way that respects the person, but also doesn't alienate the family. So I think it's not like not one or the other, but there's a very fine sort of balance. So that's fabulous. Thank you very much. And that was really nice to hear about the self-advocacy conference and I think your sort of your narrative around choice and I often think about citizenship as coming with rights and responsibilities. So there's two parts to most things. And so what you're asking for is a sort of a balanced dialogue, which I think is really, really helpful. So thank you very much. So Mike, moving on to you.
Hi, thank you. So I think that there's been a lot of really good suggestions raised already. One of the things that I think would be of value would be better professional development resources for frontline staff. With this change, we're going to need a lot of innovation. We're going to need people that are nimble, but we're also going to need a much more professional workforce. Many persons will be working in the community without close supervision. So I often think that having a really well-developed professional development program for all employees is critical. And that would be programs on leadership and followership for employees, maybe even opportunities to have joint education sessions with the persons that we support. There's been a lot of great things raised already in terms of supported decision-making and what that looks like. But having values-based education programming that's centered around the ideas and the principles of which we're trying to move forward on, I think those would be invaluable investments for everyone across the board.
Cool. Hey, and Mike, I can't help myself sort of commenting on the value of some of these suggestions. And hey, it is sort of interesting that if we're talking about there being a different partnership and a relationship between people, disabilities and families and service providers, that it's logical that we do some of the training together because in fact we need people to share the same sort of so I think again you're spot on, and I know your comments about like a skilled workforce and about training is very much on the agenda for the remedy. So that's terrific. So Joyce, coming back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would have to echo what Mike just said. I've been working different parts of the healthcare sector for 40 years, to be honest. And, you know, when I came to the Meadows community and saw, you know, that staff come in and do a few core competencies and then they're off to supporting the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. I was blown away when I look at health and I see the CCA program, and that's a certificate program of 1 year that, you know, to write CCA after your name, you've got to go through that program. So I really feel there needs to be a frontline staff education program. I do feel leadership also need some education and boards, just like I believe Tracy had said before. Yesterday, Maria, you spoke a lot about values. I love that. I think, you know, values are very important to me as well, and to our organization, and respect being one of the ones that is at the top of our list. The culture, without education and consistent messaging, it's going to be very difficult for us to change the culture. I also feel participants and families need education, just like one of my colleagues on the panel said earlier. Some don't even know what choice means. and some families don't. The families that were on the panel this morning are the exceptions. Not all the families know what their rights are and the choices are that are out there. So we need to do a better job at educating at all levels. If we don't do this, there's a huge risk that the mandate of the remedy will not be fulfilled. And that would be very, very sad. We may have to be innovative with the education. Maybe we partner with NSCC and can they deliver some education online so staff that are in the system can get well educated on, differently than they have been in the past. And I just will be very honest, if I may, and I was told by Maria that this is a safe space. I think the value of respect is one of the most important ones, and there's already a lot of really hurt people out there. And I'm just going to be, again, very honest, and Maria knows me to be brutally honest, sometimes too much. Yesterday, sitting with my group and my families, and we had a big watch party, and the comments around burning down institutions was made. For many individuals, the institutions have been their own home. So that was extremely hurtful. I know that individual who said that did not mean to hurt anybody, but I think respecting everybody from where they're coming from needs to be a core value that we have moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I think that's an incredibly important place to finish that sort of conversation on. So it's sort of like yesterday was an incredibly emotional day, and sort of like I'm sort of reflecting a bit on my experience. I spent 4 years as Mental Health Commissioner in Western Australia, and when I first started, I got seriously beaten up by the families in particular, and it was almost like you had to soak up some of the pain before you could actually move on to the next sort of step. So I think we do need to cut people a little bit of slack in terms of some of the pain and some of the experiences, but hand in hand with that really is that there needs to be a new narrative, and obviously a respectful narrative of partnership, because we need everybody on board to make this happen. So I'm sorry for the hurt that those comments made. I'm also immensely sorry for the hurt of the people whose lives were impacted by some of their life opportunities. So I think this is part of the emotion of the remedy, isn't it? It's the sort of soaking up the emotion and keeping connected, and then sort of moving forward together, I think, in a different relationship. So that was a lovely way to finish that lot of questions. Thank you, Joyce. Now, I'm sort of mindful of where we're up to. I did make a commitment to the panel that I wanted to make sure before we got into the questions and answer sort of part of the session that our service providers on the panel have been able to say the things that they think to be most important. Okay, so I just want to go back and just want to check in, because we did provide a bit of a framework, for the questions and that. But so Tracy, is there anything else that you'd like to say or add before we sort of move into the next part of the session?
I don't think so. I think I said enough.
Yep, that's great. So Hank, anything from you?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and I guess I'll use this platform to remind my colleagues, or just to share this with my colleagues, my directions council, family members and peers who do the kind of work that I do also. Someone at DASK said this a couple of weeks ago, and they weren't wrong. what we're trying to do at DASC with our shift to more actual paid employment, and the timing of the remedy, it has come at a good time, we believe, for us along those lines. I think it's really, really important to be patient with your teams, your frontline staff who are really living this in a way, and I know many of my colleagues are doing all kinds of things that are frontline as well in a given moment, right, due to stretched resources or staffing. But I've been telling people at DASC, you know what, this is going to be imperfect for a bit. This is going to be hard for a bit. This is going to be fluid, and I think it's really important. Again, this is a cultural thing. Make the shift from maybe a punitive or a prescriptive kind of approach to program delivery if it's not done exactly the way that you've done it for years or decades. Like, I'm telling people, it's okay to take risks, in the idea of, in the spirit of program ideation, program design, program delivery. If it's not compromising care, if it's not compromising safety or quality of program, take a risk. And as a leader at DASC, I'm not going to punish you for it. This is really kind of a period of experimentation. And I think, just to some of the previous comments, it's also a time of extreme stress for everybody. I mean, Maria Medioli, you've got so much on your plate, right? And but we all do. And I think it's really important to be supportive, to keep the lines of communication open. We're all here for the same reason. We're all here to support persons with disabilities achieve their potential, help empower them, help them discover what choice is and how to live it. Just be patient. I don't know. That just is something I wanted to share.
Cool. Hey, Hank, that was really good. I was just reflecting on the session you stay on the values, and one of the words in the value statements that resonated with me was kindness. And I really like that because it's about being kind to yourself. It's about being kind to each other. It's about being kind to the environment. So this sort of kindness and support of each other, well, I think it's a lovely value. And so that's certainly something I think we can take into that, like, implementation of the values, the cultural change. And so that was terrific. Thank you very much. So Mike, can we just come back to you about anything else you'd like to?
I just wanted to make a comment there regarding something that Joyce said, and I just wanted to make sure that institutions are not just the structures, it's the values and how we treat people. So I think just because you run a large institution, I wouldn't take that personally that people want to see those goes. That's just a byproduct of institutionalization. There's plenty of other small option homes and other agencies that may have much smaller operations that, while they may not be a massive structure, the institutionalization comes in how we treat people. So I just thought that I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, terrific. That's great. Hey, Joyce, coming back to you, whether there's anything else you'd like to add before we break.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just have felt really privileged to have been here today representing DANS. And as you guys can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I take my job extremely serious. I've been, like I said, in the sector for over 40 years, not the DSP, but other parts of the healthcare sector. So I don't think I've had as much excitement in my career as I have for the remedy. I'm excited. DANS is excited. We all know this is the right thing to do. And we want to make sure that we're there holding hands with the department. We adore Maria. We work very closely with Maria and her team. We're excited to be part of this change because, closing Harborside Lodge was one of the scariest things that I've ever led. And with my team, Midel and Elizabeth and Leanne and, all of them, we joined hands and we quickly joined hands with other service providers and the department and we got it done and we did a good job with the information we had at the time. So I am excited about the future. I'm excited about persons with disabilities in this province just going to better lives that they've had with choice. So I just want to thank you guys for having included me here today.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you to all the panel members. That was terrific lot of input. Hey, we're pretty much on time for having a really good session. So I think what we do now is we'll have a break for 15 minutes and come back at 3:15. That will allow us to sift through the questions. If there are more questions that people are putting into the Q&A, they can continue to come into the panel process. We'll then do a bit of sorting out about who's going to respond to which sort of questions. But that's terrific. So Hilary, we're happy if we have a break now.
Finally figured out where the on button was. I think that's great, Eddie. Fabulous panel commentary and lots of good material to work with going forward. I look forward to seeing the report as it gets published from this conference. And I thank each of you for your honesty and for your participation in this and for your vulnerabilities as well. And that's kind of the way forward for all of us as we move into this challenging future. So yes, time for a break indeed.
And maybe, Joyce, just to reflect on the fact that you saying you felt this was a safe space to be able to say what you need to say. It's a great measure of trust in our sort of partnership. So
yes,
it's a lovely note to finish this part of the session.
Absolutely.
And so we'll close off the mics and then we'll be back just after 3:15. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I just wanted to share that at the start of the call, we had 206 people signed into the call. At the current time, we've got 190 people who are still online on the Sunday afternoon, which is incredible evidence of the leadership and the commitment of our service provider community, and also to the outstanding quality of the input we've had from all of our leaders so far. So I just want to acknowledge, I sort of thought the numbers would have died away by now, but people are really very engaged with this, which is absolutely fantastic. Hey, we've done a quick run through large numbers of questions that have come through. Maria's made a commitment that all questions will be synthesised and there will be a published response. We've got the time now to respond to a number of these questions. They have been directed pretty much to Tim, myself and Maria and to Hilary as opposed to the panel members. So if panel members are okay with that, because people haven't had a lot of chance to talk about the actual remedy itself. So this is the opportunity. So we're going to start with Tim's going to pull together some of the themes, and then I'll go to Hilary, and then I'll respond to a couple of questions, and then Maria's going to close it off and sum up, and then close the afternoon. So Tim, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie, and thanks everybody in the panel and folks. That some really great stuff there, and really, as I say, and we've said this before, being out here, we said, boy, they've got some great folks out there in this community that they can rely on going forward. So I just want to respond to a couple of things. I'll do the quickie first. We had a note that you mentioned there will be no more community option homes. Well, the current small option homes aren't going away. Right? Those are not closing. So you can take that off your worry list. But all of the larger facilities will be closing. But I also wanted to start, I really appreciated Joyce's comment that, and it's not just here. The country is in a housing crisis. We're in a homelessness crisis. We're in a workforce crisis. And skilled as we are, we're not going to be able to solve that. Right. And that's not going to go away. And to some degree, it's just part of being in the community that we live in now, but it's hopefully not forever, right? And the system we're building is not for the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it's for the next 20, 30 years. So hopefully as a community, as a country, we'll get a handle on some of those things, but absolutely that's going to impact it. But it's not something that Nova Scotia is alone in dealing with. Ontario, I live in Vancouver, right? If you can find a house, it's going to cost you $2 million. So it is real. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank Joyce for pointing that out. I did also want to talk about, if folks would wonder, well, how things are going to look and what kind of things you do, what Dash's future might look like and that kind of stuff. So I just thought I'd share with you a few just real quick off the top of ideas that people have used elsewhere. And as Maria said, most of you are familiar with working with ILS anyway, right? And this is really just, in many ways, ILS on steroids with some other stuff around. It's not some weird new thing that you've never had an experience with. In terms of new roles and new directions, some of you will probably pivot into being more, and I assume you're already doing this, more like a workforce solutions. So you will have a skilled, capable team that families, individuals can come to and say, I need a support person to do this with me. And you will act as the employment agency in some ways, but with all of the added value you bring now in terms of training, support, supervision. So that's probably going to be a fairly common role that some of you are going to morph into. The day stuff, I'll give you an example of one of the things we did in BC a long time ago. And it speaks a bit to this problem. You can't hire somebody for 2 hours. What we did initially when we had a large group of folks come out of the institution and had nothing to do with the day, we called it the depot. And we had a set of trained staff and folks that were available. So individuals would come and they would have some interest. And the staff, so all the staff were full-time, and the coordinator would just link up with folks for what they wanted to do. And we also had a set of other things like you already have, right? So do you want to work in this setting, that setting, that setting? So it was a mix. But the third thing we did was we had a guy who went out and talked to we said, go talk to as many employers as you want and ask them if they're willing to let somebody with a disability have a go, right? We didn't make it complicated. We didn't make it, you need to sign these forms, you need to commit to 4 million hours. And so we had a list of experiences people could choose from. So they come into the depot and said, oh, I'd like to do that. And it was a way to start to build skills, but also to help people get experience to figure out what they wanted to do. So we had a guy who liked shiny stuff, right? That's where we started from. He liked shiny stuff. And he ended up working, not a lot, but real work for real pay. And this is 1983. Eventually being hired by a trophy company that he had an experience at to polish the trophies before they went out the door. So those kind of creative sort of stuff. And so you work as a hub rather than as a destination, if you like. Home share coordination is really important. That one of the things we learned in BC is you can't just randomly hire and let people get on with it. So now our community agencies coordinate. So they do the vetting, the hiring, the monitoring, the matching for all of that home share stuff. And I suspect that's going to be a really big role that somebody's going to have to take on in the community. For the housing stuff, folks will still live together. They will still choose to live together. But it will be their house, whether they rent it or own it. And your role will be more of filling in the staffing and the support in their home rather than in a preset home. So in terms of skill set, it will be the same as your employees are doing now, but a little different relationship. Housing development, and there's a lot of stuff coming out at the moment around this. Rather than building a small option home, some of our folks, and there's other examples in the country, are partnering with developers, and they're building beautiful condo units. And the deal is 10% of them are for folks with intellectual disabilities. And then the agency provides the support for those folks to live in. So it's a win-win. You're contributing to the housing stock for the community. You're providing integrated housing. And these, I'll give Maria the link. These are beautiful, like really beautiful condos. So there's ways around that. Another family that I know, it was a sister of a man who had significant needs, but didn't need somebody living in the same house. They were supported to build a tiny house in the back of their house, and her brother moved into the tiny house. So there are ways to address this if we just think out of the box and be creative. Yeah, so they're just, I've been jotting down some ideas to throw out to help kind of you think about directions you might want to go, but that's.
Yeah, cool. Hey, maybe just the question about small option homes. I think there was another comment earlier about if we're not building anymore, people won't have the opportunity. I think the reality is once you open this up, some of the people in small option homes are going to want something else. So there will be opportunities for people. So it's not like it's a closed off option. Just that we're saying when we tried to think about scalability and pace, we were not going to meet the remedy targets in a million years using the small options home major strategy because it was too big, too slow, and we couldn't scale it up quick enough. So hey, you probably noticed that Tim and I sort of bounce off each other a little bit. So that's sort of, but we do try and sort of add a little bit of value to what we each say. So Hillary.
And just in my own experience, in reference to that small option homes comment, a dozen years ago, a board member from HCRS and I traveled to Kingston, Ontario, and they had been 10 years already into the change of this individualized funding and so on. And the Kingston Community Living was the name of the organization, I think. They still had all of their small option homes and their group homes in operation, and they were just embarking on the working with developers on creating apartments and so on. Now, Kingston in those days was about the size of the old Halifax, Peninsula Halifax, not HRM as it is now, but it's possible to see other examples of agencies in other jurisdictions that have navigated and very successfully navigated this change. So I'm not overly worried about whether the existing homes are going to be closed or what have you. They may change in form and function a little bit, and they will as funding streams change. But the other piece around funding streams is that there is how does individualized funding work when it comes to balancing all the competing interests that are involved. So you have caregivers saying something, families saying something, day service providers saying something, and the person being supported or the person with a disability saying something. And how does all of that stuff come together? And who has the right in this, who has the right of way, for want of a better phrase? Well, the person with the disability is the person at the center of this thing. And if we don't, from my perspective, if we don't start recognizing that, the quicker we start recognizing that, then the quicker the rest of the competing interests can get resolved. And what we have traditionally done is, in the per diem based system is Johnny's coming in to live with a small option home. And all of a sudden, and the per diem was paid to the agency. Now, all of a sudden, the per diem might be the family and Johnny coming to an agency saying, we want to buy X number of hours of residential support per week. What's it going to cost? And it's going to be as brutal a conversation as that, I think, in the future or going forward. And for those agencies that haven't actually figured out how this thing is going to work in terms of costing their service, whether it's DASK trying to say, what does an hour of art class cost per person or per group, or whether it's HCRS, my former agency, trying to figure out what does a single staffed small option home cost per day or per hour or per night, then they won't be able to do the fee for service thing. And they'll be scrambling to hang on to a funding model that is really going to have a sunset. And when that sunset happens, I don't know. I don't recall exactly on which page of the plan, because it was a very detailed plan. That was laid out, right? But there is a sunset to some of our current practices, and instead of waiting for that sunset, I think some of these questions around who gets to decide. Well, service providers have an opportunity to get ahead of that curve and say, how do we cost our services? And what's the smallest unit to which we can cost our services, so that then when people come to say, I want to buy 3 units or 10 units, we're able to price it and say, here's the cost, and move forward from that. And if you don't have the money, well, I'm sorry, that's the cost of the service, right? That's kind of a challenge. Now, easier said than done, I know, because legacy programs, as Tracy pointed out in the panel conversation, what do you do with a collective agreement that says the minimum call is 4 hours, and somebody wants to buy 1 hour service? How do you figure that out, right? Those are challenges to move forward with, but I think the collaborative approach would be the way to find the answers to some of these questions around who has control over the money. Even certainly the agencies are not going to have control over the money, because it's not going to be coming to them in the traditional sense. So the agencies are going to have to figure out how they cost their services so that they can be competitive, reactive, provide quality, all those things that they cherish now. I'm preaching, and I should shut up at this point, right? I really should shut up. Okay.
Hey, that's perfect segue into next question. But just to pull out a couple of bits from that one. First of all, when it comes to the individual versus the parent family views about things, I think it's a trap to say it's one or the other. It's the nuance of the primary focus on the person, but recognizing that the family are often going to be the most enduring support that people have got. And so the art form is about keeping people engaged and on that sort of journey. So that's the first thing. And then Lorna Sullivan yesterday used this word quite a few times around becomes a negotiation. So people displaced in their families are going to negotiate with the disability support program about their level of funding. And they're actually going to, they're not going to come to your program looking for a place in your program. They're going to want to negotiate with you about what you have to offer and what it's going to cost. So I think it's sort of going to turn into a gentle negotiation. And you spoke about the cost issue, but can I just say, number one issue for people is, do they trust your organisation and do they like your staff? Because if they don't, they'll be out the door in 5 minutes. Okay, so really at the heart of all this is, you know, the quality of the staff and the quality of the relationship with the person. And where people have got a positive, trusting relationship, well, people will hang around, you know, so there's no great, but we haven't got that. That's when there's going to be a little bit of grief. So then that flows on to, we had a question from Gordon asking, as a current board member, what have you identified as the roles of current board members of organisations involved in our remedy transition model, and how and where can our governance skills serve, and how the local hubs reference being constellated? Okay, so if I could just sort of replay my experience as a board member. I'm a board member back in my home country of an organisation that does disability support, mental health support, street doctor, suicide prevention, all sorts of things. Okay, so there's two scenarios here. If your board is not informed about the remedy, there'll be two things that will happen. One is, as a CEO, you will go with ideas that the board won't support because they don't understand why you're trying to do it. And I think the other thing then is, if the board is not if the board are informed, but you've got a CEO who's not engaged with the remedy, the board, if they're informed, will actually do the required work of the CEO. Because there are a couple of scenarios here. I've seen some organisations go down the gurgler because the CEO has not bought into the remedy and just thought, oh no, we're not going to do that. We're going to, you know, play politics, do what we used to do, you know, sort of. So that's not going to work, you know. But I've also seen CEOs with great ideas and the board are too slow. Okay, too slow to really understand. So in terms of our sort of education, leadership, cultural change, we do need to deal with boards and boards chairs as part of our sort of whole ecosystem. Then I would say in the slide pack from yesterday, Tim spoke about, we've got a slide about the regional hubs, and we've got some initial architecture around what they are, sort of people on that and all that. So I would just say, I would expect in this sort of environment now of co-design and co-production, that when DSP is starting to build those, that they'll be engaging the sector in working up the terms of reference, thinking about how they can be developed and implemented. And absolutely, we want people with good governance and sort of leadership skills to be involved in those hubs, okay? And so I guess I'm sort of saying that, you know, so the partnerships we see going forward are sort of much bigger than the partnerships we've had in the past. Okay, so partnerships with the sector, partnerships with people with disabilities and their families, partnerships with the other government agencies. This is the new world about everybody working together. So that was that one. Had another question from Mary Claire McIntosh about the process for families and individuals to become part of the DSP program. Many of us have reached out to our agency, have tried to go through the intake and been declined to not enough assessment information. Hey, so in the new world, pretty much we'll have local area coordinators based in local communities. They'll be based in local community settings. People can walk in the door, they can get information. They don't need to be eligible or registered. They can get advice, they can get information. We'll help explain people the pathway to community support. If they need to come into the system, we can work with people to help that sort of a process. Okay, so I do feel for the current care coordinators, I just think they've got an impossible job. And I think intake have got an impossible job given the ratios and the complexity. So we're sort of dismantling that and creating a new robust system. So this will be very, very different. You can go to someone local, okay, that can help you with this sort of process. And even if you're not found to be eligible, you're still able to get support. Okay, so maybe not all support you need, but there'll be no sort of turning away people for that first level of support. We had a question from Robbie Hiltz. Will care coordinators monitor participants in both licensed and non-licensed homes and apartments? I understand there are many people who are excited to move in their own home, in their own bedroom, but do not have opportunities for vocational recreation or leisure programming at all. Hey, can I just say, we've done our very best to model this individual planning support coordination function to cover the whole eligible DSP population, wherever you live, whatever community, whatever support you're getting. And so we'll be in contact with people. And so this is part of what keeps people safe, because rather than people being in all sorts of arrangements where no one's in contact, this will be a separate support in addition to what services that they're getting. Okay, so again, this will take a little while to roll out. This will be a very, very important safeguard. And I think the other thing about monitoring and all that sort of stuff is, a key part of the work of the local area coordinators and the intensive planning support coordinators is, if you start with this good life question, relationships, networks, connections are what is the first thing on their list. Okay, so this is what we'll be doing, and it'll be these things that will help keep people safe. We need licensing and standards and all that, but it's having people in your life that know you and connect with you that actually keep you safe. So that's a bit of a start of an answer to some of these questions that have come through. We're sort of mindful now that it's probably a lot of the questions were directed to Maria and the Disability Support Program. She's not going to answer all of them, but we do want to give her a bit of a time now to maybe respond to a couple of things and then to start to wrap this up. So.
Wow. It's just been an amazing couple of days, I have to admit, and in many ways I have to thanks. Wow. I was saying that my tank is a little empty, just in terms of just trying to get this together to pull the conference off. And then there was a lot of emotion associated with the conference. And then, of course, there's the enormity of how we go forward. So I'm a little loopy, so just bear with me. But I do think, the intention of the conference was for us to get together to start the journey. It's sort of the official kickoff. And it's not the last time. And in fact, God bless Eddie and Tim, there's a requirement for an annual progress conference every year. So we will be doing something. We're going to do a debrief, though, and learn. A lot of things went great. But I'm sure we can learn from this. And this is just the first of many opportunities and conversations that we're going to have together, not just with service providers, but with families and persons with disabilities and our other partners. I did want to touch on something that Tim mentioned about individualized funding, because I know there's a lot of questions about it, but I do want to remind you that we have lots of individualized funding programs now. Flex at Home, that's individualized funding, and that represents, not necessarily an agency-based approach. Flex Independent, ILS is an individualized funding program, AFS is an individualized funding program, and even the some of the funding model work we did with day programs was actually based on an individual allotment. Hank, you weren't there, but there is a component of funding that is individualized. So it's not as scary as it looks. We know you have questions about fixed costs and administrative costs, but as Eddie and Tim like to say, other jurisdictions have done it. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to learn from them and hopefully take the best. But hopefully it's not a scary thing for you. Another theme I heard today, and I've always heard, is about collaboration, that you guys want to be part of the solution and work with us going forward. And I think you know me. I think we've worked on a lot of stuff together in the past. There was funding model work, both with the residential and with the day programs, the Harborside closure, COVID, we pulled together. We were meeting 3 times a week in the dark days. And in fact, we're just setting up a working group now around management and supervisory compression issues. And honestly, I like it when I work with the service providers, because then whatever we come up with, I can say you came up with it and it's not my fault, so don't call me, which is the oldest trick in the book. But I do think, if I reflect on the past where I think we've worked really well together, I've realized that there was actually a missing element, was persons with disabilities and their families. So that's a learning for me. I'm peeling the onion every day. Every day I go, oh, rats, gee, I could have done that differently. So I commit that we're going to be collaborative as we go forward, because I certainly don't know all the answers. And as I like to say, welcome to DSP, the home of imperfect options. No option we ever come up with is perfect. So we're trying to figure out which is the most, the least imperfect, let's say. But I think the vehicle for that is also going to be our regional advisory committees. Back to that, regional advisory committees are going to have service providers, families, participants, community members, et cetera. So I think that's where the collaboration really is going to need to take place. The other piece I offer up, and I don't know if Lorna spoke to it yesterday, but I've heard her speak to it before. I just think we're all going to have to be comfortable in ambiguity. The old system was great. The rules were clear. The boxes were firm. But that didn't really get us anywhere, did it? Because nobody ever fit in any of those boxes, and none of those rules delivered the outcomes we wanted. We wanted to ensure people were safe, but we know people actually in many instances weren't safe. We wanted to give people, I think we wanted to give people choice, but the system was so inflexible. So it's a challenge to be comfortable with ambiguity. And many of the things we're talking about, there's like this tension, how much choice, safety, how much family, there's going to be sort of a healthy tension as we try to navigate some of these tricky bits. But I think everybody's intentions are good. I think people trust each other. We know we're all in this together for the same reason. So I think we're just going to have to navigate that ambiguity together and trust that we can figure it out together. So in closing, I just wanted to thank everybody for a good afternoon. We had over 200 people joining us, as Eddie said, and pretty well everybody stayed for most of the afternoon, which was amazing. I want to thank again our panel members, Tracy, Hank, Joyce, and Hillary. Also Eddie and Tim for coming back to Nova Scotia for this, I believe, is your third trip from Australia, fourth trip back. Like they're really committed to us, or they should be committed. I don't know which, but they keep coming back. Of course, our team behind the scenes, Encore, who have been unbelievable, and my DSP team, which if they're still speaking to me tomorrow, it will be a miracle. So thank you to them. And on a personal note, I just wanted to mention, I just appreciate how respectful everybody is of me on a personal note. I just have to say that people are gentle and respectful, and you're able to separate me, the person, from the system. And that really means a lot and reflects really well on you. Like how many times people say, Maria, I don't know, you're just very respectful and kind. And I really, really appreciate that. And on a personal note, have I thanked everybody I'm supposed to thank? I believe so. So I think that's it. I know you're all busy and it's a Sunday afternoon. This is just the beginning, not the end. And we have a ton of follow-up that we owe you. The report, the videos, it's all coming. Just give us time. I think that's it.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.